Good evening and welcome to the City of Cedar Falls Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for February 27th, 2019. Ms. Howard, could we have the roll?
Atkins?
Here.
DeRusso?
Here.
Hartley?
Here.
Holst?
Here.
Larson?
Here.
Leeper?
Here.
Overly? Saul? Wingert. Note that Overly, Saul, and Wingert are absent.
Thank you. First item of business is the approval of the minutes from the February 13th, 2019 meeting. Is there a motion?
I move to approve.
Second that motion?
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
That carries. We'll move on to the public comments. I'm going to do something a little unusual in the public comments this time. I think a lot of you are here for the Green Hill Village Townhomes, and there was a lot of discussion in previous meetings on the rezoning, or the, I guess it's not actually rezoning, it was the redoing of the master plan for, because it's an RP district that was done back in March, which has been of concern. However, that's not on our agenda tonight because that's not part of the planning process. So what I'm going to ask is the folks who are here tonight who want to address that aspect, if you would address that here during the public comments period, so you can get whatever you want on the record regarding that, because I know it's controversial and there's a lot of upset about that, and et cetera. So what I'd like to invite people who want to comment on that portion, that relationship to that project, if you would do that here at this public comment period. And then when we get to the Green Hill Village, then we're going to try to keep that focus on the plat part, because as the commission, we don't really have any authority to do anything else in talking with the staff and et cetera. We're a volunteer commission, so what we're doing here is we're taking the information, we have to make a decision on it, and it gets recommended to the city council, who is making the decision, so to speak. So we're kind of limited in what authority we have, so we're going to try to do the best here to get everybody's input. Hopefully this all gets out there so it can move to the city council and get addressed there in whatever manner. Hopefully find a way to treat everybody fairly, I'm hoping, but that goes kind of beyond what happens here at Planning and Zoning. So I hope that makes sense. So at this point, we're open for public comment, and I'd invite anyone who would like to speak to the commission to come and talk about, particularly if you're interested in talking about the Green Hill Village, Village Townhomes. Come on forward and state your name and address.
Chris Nolan, 1510 Athens Court, Cedar Falls, Iowa. Thanks for the opportunity. I understand what you're saying, but I know you can't do anything, but you're the ones that got us here in the first place, right?
We're going to try to do our best.
Okay. We're here to voice our objection again to the land at the northwest corner of Green Hill Village being changed to high density, allowing 34 three-story townhouses to be built in an area with existing single-family homes on two sides. We were not notified by mail of the March 2018 meeting concerning the change to the master plan for Green Hill Village and to increase the density. We have 45 signed statements of the 39 people on the mailing list, 39 addresses on the mailing list stating they did not receive the letter. City staff said it is not required by law to mail out notices, but their past actions of the mailings sets a precedent for what someone would reasonably expect. For example, I received 2 mailed notices for the Prairie West development across from Hudson Road from Green Hill Village. That's substantially further away than this subdivision. In addition, city staff said at February 11th meeting that the Blackhawk County Assessor site showing part of the land zoned R1 was incorrect and has been for 20 years. That's an injustice. We were counting on this being R1, as we would have to be notified as to any zoning changes. I said at the last planning and zoning meeting that there were 155 single-family homes in Green Hill Village. I'd like to correct that. There's 184. There is a substantial amount. There's 168 condos that are for rent out there, and there are another 44% of the other condos are rented. So we have a substantial amount of high-density living in that neighborhood. Staff stated the R1 land in question was only a sliver of land. I'd like to correct that. It's 33% of the development land. It's not a sliver. It was mentioned by a member of the Planning and Zoning Commission that the developer might make concessions to the development to accommodate the concerns of the neighbors. I contacted the developer, and they are unable to make any concessions. We are at this point tonight because the changes were made without any voice from the neighborhood or appearance of neighbors at the Planning and Zoning meeting in March of 2018. Also because of the wrong information allowed to stay on the assessor's site for 20 years. I'm not sure if the present situation would be the same if the commission had been able to hear from us. It's unfortunate that this proceeded and has put the developer in a position of accruing financial cost. We are asking the density of this project be reduced and 3-story units not to back up to existing homes on Athens Court. This has been referred to not in my backyard. It is more than that. It's about property values being reduced because of the close proximity of this development. Few people would want to live so close to this. I ask that you put yourself in our position and make your decision based on this development happening in your neighborhood. It's the simplest way to make a decision. The desire of the developer to build this project and make a profit should be balanced against the loss in the value to existing homes. Having deep pockets comes with responsibilities to act in a responsible manner toward others in the community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the audience would like to make a public comment tonight?
My name's Tim Jarks. I live at 1521 Athens Court. My property is directly adjacent to this future proposed development. 2 weeks ago, 62 people showed up to oppose the proposed zoning change in our neighborhood. Tonight, there are a bunch here to oppose the change again. I don't know how many are here. I haven't had a chance to count. Most all of them, the same people who lost or can't remember a letter back in March of 2018 per a statement made by staff. That letter stating the commission would discuss, consider any statement or any public comment. But yet, we're all here again, just like we were 2 weeks ago, even though we've had this discrepancy of notice. These are the facts of our opposition. Do you think we would have been here back March 2018 when this all changed if we would have known about the proposed change to amend the original master plan? I know we would have been here. We're here tonight. We've been here 2 weeks ago. So let's go through some facts and some history here. It is, per staff comments, a standard practice, and I'm going to prove that with a letter I'm going to read, to notify adjoining neighbors and homeowners when a request is made to amend the existing master plan with zoning and density changes. Again, a letter was supposedly sent out to the neighbors, which again, I'm just emphasizing, is a standard practice. This is not about legality, which may or may not be, but it is a standard practice that this happens. But the letter that we were supposed to get, again, was lost. Now, since then, in the last 2 weeks, many letters, emails, phone calls were made by all the same people that have been here, voicing our opposition to this proposed development. So let's discuss a little bit more the timeline of the events. A letter was sent out back in March of 2018. No one showed up at the meeting. Kind of odd. The proposed zoning change was approved from single family to allow multifamily. And I want to share, because I've watched the last zoning meeting several times, and this map was showed several times. And if you look at it, it shows single family up there next to our neighborhood, okay? Staff commented that they sent revised, amended master plans, changes to the county assessor, and they also stated in that last meeting that they revised the city master plan recently, which is what they said we were supposed to do, is look at the city plan, not the county one. So that was just changed too. When, I don't know, but she said recently. So was that after the March 2018 meeting that took place? So was the city's master plan also incorrect before, along with the assessor's plans? 20 years ago, 2 years ago, what, 9 months or a year ago? I don't know. Now we are discussing, is it legally required to notify neighbors of changes to zoning and density plans? Like, are we being bamboozled? Are we defining bamboozled? I mean, which one is it? I asked the commission here tonight to represent us fairly and equally. So what should have happened in March of 2018 can happen now. We asked the commission to seriously consider our public comments and objections here, which I believe is the purpose of the commission and staff. This is a letter that would have went out, supposedly went out back in March of 2018. And I think it's a standard practice that they do. So here's the letter. Dear area residents and property owners, I wish to notify you that the city of Cedar Falls has received a request from Panther Builders, LLC, to amend the master plan pertaining to Green Hill Village development area. Master plan, single family. You're receiving this notice because you either have property adjacent to it or live very close to it. The Cedar Falls Planning and Zoning Commission will consider the appropriateness of the request at their meeting on Wednesday, March 28th, 2018. At that time, the commission will discuss the request and consider any public comments on it, which is what we're doing now. We didn't have a chance then. Interested persons are welcome to attend the meeting. Written comments may be also submitted to this department. If the comments are received before the meeting, staff will share them with the commission members, so that they have an opportunity to review those comments. So we're a year behind here. So going back, we are asking you now, like we would have back in March of 2018, to protect our wonderful neighborhood. We have a very, I'm sure other neighborhoods are neat, but we have a very unique neighborhood. You can't hardly go for a walk and walk a block or two, and you're surrounded by neighbors, talking, kids playing. That's our neighborhood. We're asking you to protect it. Protect our property values. Our property values will be affected. I would ask that if you was to have this development in your backyard, front yard, beside your neighborhoods, is this something that you would want? Developers should be allowed to make money, make a profit, but not off the backs of families, our property values, and our lifestyles. You as a commission can vote to not approve the preliminary plat before you. We ask that single-family dwellings be returned to the original master plan as shown again on this map. This is the one we went by. This is the one we showed us. And we are asking this, per this map, that a minimum single-family homes be placed on the west side of the development along North Drive and along the south side, southern area of the development, as per this map, so that our homes are buffered from this large three-story dwelling development, whatever you want to call it. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Any other public comments on, before I close the public comments?
Hi.
Thank you.
Jesse Vickers, 1531 Andover Court. Last time the minutes did mention that I'd said, I have a concern about traffic, which is a tip of the iceberg of what I'd said. I'd also like to respond to some of the things that were mentioned. Previously, it was said that they didn't understand how shared walls would lead to rental properties. I agree with that. However, the main term I want to focus on is high density, which means more population. It's a surplus in an area that has very difficult situation already with traffic. I implore you, please come to our bus stop at 8:05 in the morning and see if we're not already dealing with a serious issue with traffic as we wait for that bus to come. It has been an absolute nightmare, especially this morning with all of the snow. I'm trying to envision that being a through street, and the fact that we need our children to, even in the summer, just have a place where they can play and not have to worry about cars zooming and zipping down through there. It's gonna happen. Kids play out there. It's hard to stop them from doing that. So that is a big deal. The other thing that was comical to me was the thought that privacy for the individuals whose backyards back that up, it was suggested that perhaps some greenery would be used. Well, these are three-story high buildings. I would like to know what magical plant is tall enough to provide the protection that we're asking for in privacy here. And would the builder, if that plant dies, come in and replace it? Whose responsibility is that? It's something to think about. You know, this does change and impact our lives. They're making money, but it impacts us. They build their stuff and then they leave. And we have to deal with what's left. So those are the things that are on my mind and my heart. Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Michele Hansen. I live at 1517 Athens Court. I'm the ranch house that will be in this area. This will be in my backyard. I have three short things I want to touch base on. One, lack of notice, which we've already talked about. While staff tells us that it's not required that you give us notice, it's been the city's practice, and it's something that people have come to expect. It's become a practice that's controlling with precedents. Citizens who hear that from others, oh, don't worry, you'll know when something's going to happen, let their guards down, and that's why it's always been that you do, for this reason, send out notices. So in this case, this is an issue that we can't ignore. The city also can't be bothered to update the county website to keep records of these mailings. And if you did mail them, where's our proof? And it's an insult to all of us that signed these legal affidavits under oath that we did not receive them. So this wasn't a matter of, oh, we forgot, that we just didn't get them. With the discrepancy between the city and the county websites, every realtor and professional uses this website as their Bible. The county website was updated to list Karen Howard as the point of contact for Cedar Falls upon her recent hiring, but apparently couldn't been updated to accurately reflect the proper zoning in the crucial area of this neighborhood. This calls into question whether city is actually correct when they say that the site is right or the county is wrong. We are still investigating this, and this is a process that shouldn't proceed until formal legal opinions have been issued to make sure that in 1998, the disputed chunk of land was indeed properly rezoned MU. Why should the citizens suffer for the city's mistake? Why hasn't this been noticed before? Perhaps because the city's not taking the time to properly vet these issues and is racing to the finish line for controversial developments, and they're hoping that no one will notice or speak up. Why isn't the developer made to share in the burden of the consequences of some of these errors? Also, why is it automatic that the development is not affected by these errors? And lastly, why are we getting legal opinion from Karen Howard on the notice issues and zoning discrepancies? There's been a distinct lack of weigh-in on attendance from the actual city attorney on this issue and others that have been coming before the Planning and Zoning Committee. And lastly, for you, I ask this because you're the ones that are voting. You're going to be told that tonight you need to vote on this issue that's proposed before this plat, and its conformity with the MU district and nothing else to be considered. One, that's not true. Two, if you believe there's a chance at all that this isn't all MU and that partially maybe a chunk of this is misvoted or misrepresented, you can vote no. Also, if you believe the city has violated its long-held practice and precedence of providing notices such that we were told we got and didn't, you can also vote no. And finally, if you're just unsure how to vote until further guidance has been given on this correct zoning and more evidence has been put forth for this notice, please vote to defer. This is our lives you're dealing with. This is me in a ranch house with you in my backyard, a 3-story townhouse. There's no tree that's going to grow before I'm dead that's going to give me any privacy. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to make a public comment tonight on anything? It doesn't have to be.
Hi, my name is Nadine Beck, and I live in 1518 Athens Court. I guess I spoke last 2 weeks ago, so you know my views. But just as a planning and zoning commission, as you said, Mari, that you guys are a volunteer group. But you do have a lot of responsibility because it seems as if the city council takes, decisions that you make pretty seriously when they vote on it. And so you are responsible really for how the city is going to look in the future. And this is a city that has a long history. I was at the Ulysses Grant Museum in Galena, and apparently President Grant, when he was a young man, used to come here to buy fur. So Cedar Falls has existed for a long time. And so how it will continue to exist in the future, to a certain extent lies on your hands. So when these matters come up, I know it's a pretty painful thing to come here every 2 weeks and have these meetings, but you should really take these matters seriously because the impact can be quite significant over a long period of time, how the face of Cedar Falls changes. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to speak? Otherwise, I will.
Okay, I sent a letter or an email.
You give us your name and address first.
I'm sorry, yes, my name is Daniel. That's why I live on 1523 Andover Court. So I just wanted to read it. That way it's much easier instead of me blabbering. So, all right. I'm sorry for taking time. I'm trying to find my letter. Okay, here's what I wrote. My wife Elizabeth and I, together with our 2 sons, are residents of 1523 Andover Court. Our house what was one of the first few houses built in Green Hill Village in 2004. We gained occupancy at the beginning of 2005. For an experienced world traveler who resided in 3 continents and 5 countries, including a major world metropolis, Cedar Falls is the smallest city, but one where I am delighted to have been living in for the past 20 years and raise our family in the tranquility and serenity of this beautiful city. Among the greatest assets that Cedar Falls exhibits are the efficiency of its city services, safety of residents, delivery of utilities, including high-speed internet, proximity to work, shopping, and mainly the Cedar Falls nicety and many other positive attributes. What makes me write this note is to get your attention to a situation in Green Hill Village, of course, where we are, where my above-mentioned attributes about Cedar Falls are likely to be tainted in my mind and others with a seemingly mysterious arrangement of a process to issue a permit to build these 34 townhouses without consulting residents that are directly or indirectly affected by this development. Why I say mysterious, at least in my mind, arrangement is the fact that none of the supposedly sent mailings of the March 2018 Planning and Zoning Committee meeting was received by any of our neighborhood residents. This very episode impaired residents from raising legitimate concerns about the proposed development during the initial meetings in 2018, but instead the committee decided to approve without weighing the adverse impact on us, which translates in reduction of our home values, additional traffic congestion, like was mentioned before, and increased safety concerns for our children, and more to mention. So back in my surveying days of our plot, when we purchased our property in 2004, and visits to the original builder, which was called Regency Homes, I was informed that our neighborhood was slated for single-family housing. Never was a mention of high-density living environments. I disagree firmly with the proposal of adding high-density housing and remain steadfast supporter of the original zoning of single-family house that I had a knowledge of. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
My name is Deepani Samrakon, and I live in 1518 Athens Court. First, I want to be on record saying that I'm opposed to this project, and I want to appeal to the Commission to consider the fact that this is one commercial development against all our lifetime's investments. This is the only, our homes are, for most of us, that's the only investment we have. That's our lifetime savings, as opposed to a commercial builder's commercial venture. And I appeal you to consider that fact strongly. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who would like to make a public comment tonight?
Hello, I'm Robin Frost. I live at 4718 Addison Drive. And I didn't prepare many remarks for you tonight. I just wanted to build on what others have said. I just would encourage you to consider this proposed development and the fact that it really just doesn't make sense in the neighborhood that we're currently occupying. When you take a look at your packet, you'll see a few pictures of some of the surrounding homes that will border this new townhome development. And they're really nice homes. They're really beautiful homes. They're well maintained. This new development will really introduce a completely different style to the neighborhood, a completely different structure, size. The 3 stories is a main concern that will be in the backyards of some of those nice homes that you've seen in those pictures. Finally, I would like to say that I do resent the remark that was made last time about the fact that the developer has gone ahead and spent money on the plans that he has put in front of you. I would think that most of us in the room have put a significant amount of our own life savings and money towards our homes, and we stand to lose a great deal more than a developer. I feel like my remarks from the last time were a little bit glossed over in the minutes. I do appreciate that you said that I was in favor of going back to the beginning of the process and starting over, and trying to look at the fact that we weren't notified and things like that, as other people have mentioned. But I feel like I asked for a few other things as well, and in terms of a meeting with the developer and different items like that were not acknowledged in those minutes. So I would encourage you to revisit that video from the meeting and some of those other issues that I brought up. So I would like to say in closing that I'm opposed firmly to this development, and thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Any more public comments tonight? I don't know, Karen, if we want to make any comments on the kind of the whole procedural issue of kind of where we're at with that. You know, what the commission's latitude is and not, and things like that, in terms of, you know, this happened in March. Unfortunately, you know, I think we all would have been much happier had everybody been involved at that point, and we had that discussion, because it doesn't do any good to the folks who didn't get voice at that point. Also doesn't do any good to the developer who has now, you know, had to gone ahead and done a bunch of work, as you would expect. And so, if you want to, I don't know if you have any kind of guidance or comments you want to share with us or the group, just to
So
process.
we'll reserve
Candee.
some of those comments for when you're talking about the actual item that's on the agenda, which is the preliminary plat and the site plan request. There are some clarifications and some confusion about the process, and I can go through that as well when we get to that point.
Terrific.
But I think this period of time for the public comments for items not on the agenda.
Right.
And so the commission can't act on anything that's not on the agenda. So you're here to listen to what the comments that people are making during this time, and anything that's relevant to the actual items on the agenda, which are the subdivision and the site plan. Those will be taken into
Those will
consideration.
be discussed when we get to that item.
During that item.
But for the record, then, these comments are put into the public record, and
Oh, sure, they're part of the meeting, and they're part of.
hopefully this goes forward to the city council so they know what discussion has occurred. You know, hopefully in the future, you know, we can look at better ways to make sure our communication within the city is happening, because we, like I said, I mean, we would much prefer to have all this conversation back in March all at the same time. And I think, you know, as a city, we need to figure out a way to be a little bit better. Can't do anything about this situation right now, apparently, in terms of we can't fix what didn't work, didn't go right, didn't go well in the past. But you know, hopefully we can be more aware in the future so we don't have issues like this crop up again. So I know that's not going to satisfy anybody, but this seems to be where we're at right now. So if any commission members want to make a comment, otherwise we'll close the public hearing and move on to our regular business. So close the public comments period, and then we'll go on to the public hearing. We have two tonight. The first is a land use map amendment, and no, I don't want that. It's for the southeast corner of Union Road and West 12th Street. And who's introducing this tonight? David, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Holtz. I introduced this last time at the P&Z meeting, but the property is located at the southeast corner of 12th and Union Road. It's a 42-acre parcel, and we have this first item is a land use map amendment. So I'll just go over those characteristics of what that designation is. The current land use, which was adopted in the comprehensive plan in 2012, designates the entire area as basically greenways and floodplain districts in that 42 acres. And what those characteristics are is basically there is a floodplain that runs through the middle of that site. We want some buffering on that. Other characteristics of that include parks and recreational areas, environmental sensitive areas. We want to have some stormwater management with that, and there's trails within and around the development. So that's basically your greenways and floodplain characteristics. Just a little kind of history of when that was changed back in 2012. The 2011 floodplain that was adopted with our FEMA firm maps in, well, it was basically 1985 and 2011, that floodplain pretty much covered most of this site. So it was roughly about 70% of that property in the floodplain. So that's why they kind of designated that as greenways and floodplain areas in that site. Well, after that, there's been some studies downstream of that, and that actual floodplain is identified there, and the blue shade was reduced significantly, which really encompassed about 30% of that entire 42 acres in the floodplain. So basically, that was kind of one of the characteristics we want to take a look at when we look at your changes in the land use. So the proposed for this land use change on the 42 acres is to maintain the greenways and floodways, but insert the planned development aspect of that surrounding that drainage way that runs through the middle of this site. And basically, again, the floodplain does cover about 30% of that property. We want to pull out some of those or maintain some of those aspects of the greenways area, and as this development proceeds down the road with the platting and phasing of that, we want to make sure we take a good look at the stormwater management. There's going to be trails within and adjacent to the development. There'll be some open spaces in this concept, but there's existing parks, golf courses, and ball fields surrounding this site. So with that in mind, we would recommend approval to amend the future land use from the greenways and floodplain to greenways, floodplain, and planned development based on following conditions with conformance with the city staff recommendations and any comments that the Planning and Zoning Commission may have.
Thank you, David.
You have the applicant here if they want to come to the microphone and present some comments and have any questions for them.
And just for procedural reference, this is a public hearing, and so we have a few steps. Come on up. We're going to hear from the applicant, and then I will open it for public comment, and we'll allow the public to comment on that, and then we'll close public comment at that point, and it'll be brought back to the commission for discussion and action. Well, after I close the public comment, we'll also give the applicant a chance to rebut or respond to any comments that came up during the public comment period. So just kind of a procedural thing. So name and address.
Thank you. My name is Lisa Nelson, and I'm here as the president of the board of New Aldea Lifescapes.
Thanks, Lisa.
In the 6 years that I've served on the board, it has become increasingly clear to us that there is a need in Cedar Falls for a senior lifestyle neighborhood that offers a particular set of amenities that just doesn't exist at this time. As a continuation of our Live Better, Live Well initiative, the neighborhood that we envision will fill this void, providing an exciting, diversified development that is in keeping with the rich quality of life that currently exists in Cedar Falls. We appreciate the conversations that we've had with those who would be our neighbors in this area, and we look forward to continuing to share our excitement as this process continues. We also have an excellent team of professionals who are working with us to plan a neighborhood that will enhance the surrounding properties, manage stormwater and traffic, all of those things that are required of every development in this city. We believe the terraces at West Glen will prove to be another asset, adding to the vision of Cedar Falls as an active, healthy, vibrant community in which to live at every age. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Lisa. I'll open the floor to public comment on this item, and I also note there's actually two items, right? Right now we're discussing the land use map amendment, and there will be a second item, which is on this same property, which is the actual rezoning of the property will be the second item we're discussing tonight. So if you would like to make comments on the land use amendment, please come to the microphone and give your name and address.
Good evening. My name is Mark Siegrist. I reside at 1028 Cherrywood Drive here in Cedar Falls. Got a few things to cover tonight. I addressed the commission back on January 23rd, reference to proposed rezoning and development of the southeast corner of Union and 12th, which we're speaking about tonight. The developer would like to see the area rezoned from agricultural to RP. The three main concerns I brought up to the board at that time were, one, the amount of traffic that the proposed campus would bring to the already very busy intersection of 12th and Union. Second, the three-story structure proposed at the intersection of Union Road and 12th and how it doesn't fit the existing surrounding developments. Similar to what you just heard from the people off of Green Hill, it doesn't fit. It's not, it just doesn't fit there, period. The serious issue of stormwater management for the property in question and how changing the zoning from agricultural to residential would affect the surrounding development of the Cherrywood Acres to the northwest, Wild Horse to the west, and Lexington Heights to the southeast. Needless to say, I was very disappointed and very concerned when I asked the members of the commission and Mr. Sturch if anyone had done their homework and had witnessed the transformation of that area in question during or after any substantial rainfall. And when I asked that question, you all looked at me like I was a ghost because you haven't done your homework. This was a huge red flag because no one in this room has done it. I urge you to listen to myself and other local residents who have lived in the area and not to rely on information given to you by a third party who would have a monetary and vested interest in developing this property. During the meeting on January 23rd, and in the background analysis, which was just placed up on the screen here a few minutes ago, Mr. Sturch stated that the future land use map identifies the property as a greenways floodplain. And that's 70%. At the studies before, puts it at a greenway floodplain. The land use analysis is the first step in the rezoning process. That's why we're here tonight, the first step. Before that property can be rezoned to allow residential development, the future land use map must be amended from the greenways floodplain to a combination of planned development and greenways floodplain that will more closely distinguish the actual floodplain area from the developable portion of the property. And by the way, this is word for word from your minutes and from the background packet that was posted online and given to me. One important feature of the stormwater management plan is to account for the additional stormwater that is received into this site from the surrounding developments to the west and the north. On that same background analysis packet, it states that FEMA has submitted a preliminary set of floodplain maps to the city for review. The review process will take place over the next 18 to 20 months. What I just read to you is verbatim from the analysis and the background. Nothing I'm making up. 18 to 20 months for FEMA to review it. Ladies and gentlemen, that was 35 days ago. I don't know what the rush is. I believe it's very important in our best interest and your interest as a committee to wait for a thorough review from FEMA. Because in that 18 to 20 months, it will give FEMA the opportunity to properly study the entire area in question. In that 18 to 20 months, it will also give you the opportunity to go out and see what happens in the neighborhoods around the proposed development and witness the rise of water and how it runs through and south into the Lexington subdivision. It was mentioned by Mr. Sturch that the city could request a rush on the FEMA study, quote unquote, a rush. How do you study groundwater runoff and a substantial rainfall in the middle of January and February in the state of Iowa? Can't be done, people. If you go out there right now, it's a 2-foot wide creek. How do you study that and rush it in January and February? That's like trying to study the depth of the snowdrift on Hudson Road on the 4th of July. You can't do it. Speaking of the FEMA study, after the last planning and zoning meeting, I contacted Mr. Sturge's office and requested a number of items. 2 of the items I requested were the last 2 of FEMA studies that were conducted. One was from 1985 and the second was from July of 2011. Upon review, the 1985 and 2011 studies were identical. They both showed that this area that wants to be developed, 70% of it is in the floodplain. It's going to have water, 70%. That's the last study that was done was in 2011. Both showed a very large portion of the area that is in question, from 12th Street all the way through down to Lexington Heights and ending near the Unidome. It's a 100-year floodplain. I'm going to read what was stated on that FEMA report because I'm guessing maybe you haven't seen this. If you need a copy, I got one. quote unquote, from FEMA, we base this determination on the 100% annual chance, which is the 100-year floodplain, that discharges and computed in the flood insurance study. The flood insurance study is what affects home insurance policies for your community without considering subsequent changes in watershed characteristics that could increase flood discharges. Listen to this very carefully. Future development of projects upstream could cause increased flood discharges, which could cause increased flood hazards. A comprehensive restudy of your community's flood hazards the comprehensive restudy of your community's flood hazards would consider the cumulative effects of development on flood discharges subsequent to the publication of a FIS report for your community, and therefore establishes a greater flood hazard for that area. That's a quote in the report from 2011. Since 2011, almost every house in the lower part of Lexington Heights and all the homes on the Wild Horse subdivision, which is on the west side of the 12th and Union, have been built. All. They are the future development projects that could and did have an increased flood discharge and increased the flood hazard. The water runoff where Wild Horse subdivision is used to run south and to the southwest. Not anymore. It's coming under Union Road through the proposed area and literally in the backyard of the residents of Lexington Heights. All the water from the south and the west side of the city-owned golf course runs into Lexington. All the water from Cherrywood Acres and Alexis Boulevard runs down to Lexington. The city underestimated the amount of runoff when they approved these developments to be built and grossly miscalculated the size of the retention ponds and the culvert sizes to adequately handle the water flow. Now, Mr. Sturch and the developers of New Aldea want to rush a FEMA study and rush you into making a decision. After the meeting on February 13th, out in the hallway, a resident of Lexington, Mrs. Carmen Mason, voiced her concerns at that meeting, and she was also speaking to the developers out in the hallway, standing about 2 feet from her. The people from New Aldea and the hired engineer, John Beardman, were in the hallway. She was discussing her concerns and showed photos of the flooding on her property from a recent rainstorm and how the retention pond that's supposed to hold the water didn't, and how the water was backing up into her property and others. I heard Mr. Beardman, the civil engineer, state there are over 400 acres that drain into one culvert. Melissa Tierney, the CEO of New Aldea, viewed the photos and stated, quote unquote, currently that retention pond in Lexington is not working. Well said, Ms. Tierney. It's not working. It's blatantly obvious that before any type of platting or rezoning is done for this area, that's what you're doing tonight, the city needs to address and fix the problem that they approved and caused. The information and studies that Mr. Sturch and the developers want to utilize are outdated. 2011, it's 2019, 8 years, and they want to rush the study. At the first meeting, Ms. Overly, who is not here tonight, stated that she felt the biggest issue with the continued development was stormwater. At the last meeting, Mr. Hartley asked for more clarification on the water runoff. Mr. Sturch noted that in the platting process, they will look at the water received and develop a plan to manage the water and release it on a controlled rate. Mr. Hartley asked if the water retention plan would improve the runoff. Ms. Howard stated that it'll have to be designed to manage the water draining from that site. The developer is required to retain a 100-year storm and release it at a 2-year rate. And here lies the issue. The city is going to rely on the word of an engineer who is paid by the developer. When issues arise, and they will arise because of outdated or skewed information, the developer will wash their hands of it and say, hey, it's the city's issue because they signed off on it. And the city will wash their hands and blame the developer. And who's left for the problems? The homeowner. This has happened before, and frankly, it's wrong. This process is simply screwed up, and it obviously favors the city so they can increase their tax revenue and developers can build what they want. There are no checks and balances in this current process. Ladies and gentlemen, this can change tonight. I urge you as a committee to demand and wait for more clarification on the biggest issue, which is the stormwater management. Wait for the FEMA study to be done properly and not rushed. Wait until you can physically go out and see with your own eyes how much water comes into this area when all the snow melts this spring and we start to receive substantial rain in this upcoming spring, summer, and fall months. Wait and do not vote on this amendment or rezoning this property. There's nothing that says you have to vote on this tonight, people. Just as was stated earlier, you can say no or you can table it. Wait and do the right thing to protect the citizens and the homeowners who have invested in their homes, just like the people from this neighborhood over there. Our life savings, we've invested in it. Please, protect us and the homeowners who invested it, and please, we trust that you make an educated and sound decision. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
I'm Bruce Adkins. I live at 4201 Newland Drive in Shear Falls. I've lived there with my wife and family for 35 years, so I have a real history with this area. The water runoff problem is huge there. It is currently. It's gotten worse. We were not even in the city to start with in Cherrywood, and it grew out. The city grew to meet us, which was okay. We didn't mind that. But what they didn't deal with enough was taking care of the water runoff. I have seen some horrendous floods out there, not just once or twice, but many times, because the runoff is not adequate even now. There are just a number of things there. So I think I would also echo my opinion. Take your time, get a good report from FEMA. Don't rush this thing. Make sure the water runoff is taken care of, because it is a huge issue even today. I've seen that gully down through there flooded like you can't believe. I've seen it flooded in Cherrywood. You know, I've seen those houses in behind there. It just looked like you had a lake back there. So this is something that's really important. One of the things I think I'd like to talk about is in that area that they're talking about, this development. To the south, there are a few acreages. Otherwise, it all developed over time to single-family homes. That's all they are. It's a great neighborhood. It's a great area. We've got great neighbors. We love it a lot. The thing that I don't understand is I don't think this is even suited for RP. I don't think it's even suited for it. Not against development. I'm not against the single family and the two unit, not at all. But the multi-unit dwellings are totally out of place, and they're going to really add to your water problem. They're going to cover a lot of parking lots and stuff like that. We are having trouble now from across the road that was developed, and they tried to slow down the runoff to go under the street, and literally the water's about ready to run over Union Road when it's bad. And this spring is not going to be an exception to that. So the runoff question is huge. It is gigantic. We've been caught up in that a few times. City even came out in Cherrywood and have tried to correct a few things that happen over time to relieve it. Because some of the houses there that aren't even in a floodplain had water right up to their foundation because the culvert was too little. Mark referenced that. This is a project I think you really need to take slowly and look at it carefully. I also would recommend that you postpone any decision on this until you give FEMA a time to make an extensive study of what's going to happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on the land, proposed land use? We'll let you do that, Dave.
So Marty,
Yes.
maybe just a point of clarification that David could provide on the issue of what's actually in the firm maps right now. So he could run through the history of that again. I think you went through that pretty fast, and so you can comment on what the actual FEMA maps are currently, and then comment on
And what their status is and
right.
all that good
So
stuff.
I think there's a little confusion about the history of the maps.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I go back to that slide of the floodplain that runs through there, the 2011 floodplain and the 1985, the 2011 firm was identified in that red area. There was studies to that in 2014 that changed that to the blue shaded area. And so the proposed floodplain maps, FEMA's done the study already. They've given those maps to the city to review. There's going to be a public meeting coming up here on March 13th for the public to view. These maps are online already, and that's what the blue shaded area is identified as the current floodplain.
And what, if anything, would change that floodplain from how it's currently shown right now?
David, just to clarify though, before you get to the ones that are preliminary right now, the current maps show of 2014, which is currently on the books, is the blue area that's shown here. That's already on the books, is that correct, David? The firm
There was a
maps?
study after the 2011 maps that validated that blue shaded area. So it reduced the floodplain from the
Right.
2011 maps.
So that's where our floodplain is
That's
at
our
today.
current
That's the
floodplain
current.
right there is that blue shaded area.
Okay.
So the preliminary maps that are currently being studied, that's a process that's happening into the future. This is the floodplain that has been studied and that is on the books currently.
Just to be clear, FEMA's already studied this area and provided those preliminary maps to us.
Right.
So there is a process that we review those maps, and in 18 months or so, they will become official, which is, again, identified that blue shaded area.
Right. And they would not be doing anything beyond that for the future.
Well, again, as we get into this process with the platting and development of this property and everything downstream, that's what they take a look at is the stormwater review and changes to that drainage way.
Right.
And how this development and future developments affect that.
Right, each development will have to be analyzed on its own basis versus the current conditions. Yep. Okay,
The current floodplain is not the red area anymore. The current floodplain is that.
is the blue, yes, which is 2014. Okay. The public hearing is still open. If there's anybody else who would like to make a comment on the land use, proposed land use amendment.
Mark Siegrist again, and I'm back because I'm not satisfied with that answer. When I contacted Mr. Sturch a week and a half ago, I said I requested all FEMA studies and anything related to this. I didn't get any of this, none of it. Why is that being withheld and all of a sudden being brought up tonight and they're saying that the studies are showing this? Well, if the studies are showing this, they're preliminary studies, they're not concrete. This sounds like a study maybe done by the city or the developer, but we have nothing from FEMA. And until we have something from FEMA, until we have something in writing, and until we have you folks honestly go out and take a look at this, that's irrelevant. You can put anything on paper.
My understanding, these are FEMA maps,
These are
right?
FEMA maps.
I asked for that, and if I wasn't given those maps, then it's still preliminary. And if it's preliminary, you shouldn't be making any decisions on anything, and that's preliminary. That's like going down to the car dealership and trying to talk them back and forth, and the preliminary price is definitely not going to be the final price. I don't appreciate the fact that I asked him for paperwork, and this was completely not even brought up until tonight. But now he's saying that's basically almost official. It's not. It's not official until FEMA signs off. It's not official until the city signs off. I should have had that paperwork. I was denied that paperwork. And when it comes back to what I stated, is you need to go out and look. You can see something on a map, the first good rainfall we have when we get 2 or 4 inches, you're going to look at that paperwork and say, I don't know who the hell did this, but they're messed up.
I guess comment, I mean, you should have gotten the paperwork.
I didn't.
Apologize.
There's a problem. We're talking about transparency in government and citizens nowadays, and I was not allowed that paperwork. I would have came with a completely different study tonight,
That was a mistake that we can correct. But
kind of like the mailing.
that doesn't mean that the FEMA maps don't exist and that they are preliminary.
Preliminary, and they may exist.
Not preliminary.
They're not preliminary.
That's what they're telling us, yeah. I mean,
They're final maps, is what I'm
The
hearing.
DNR.
Can we have copies?
Sure.
Well, I
And they're
should have
on
had
the
them a
city's
week and a
web-
half ago.
The maps have been on the website. The city maintains the floodplain maps on the city's GIS system. It's available anytime. They're flood insurance rate maps, so all insurance companies in the area have those maps. Those are what determine whether you need to have flood insurance or not. So these are maps from the DNR, the Iowa DNR, and from FEMA. The city doesn't control the floodplain. We just monitor when properties come in for development, whether or not they're in the floodplain. It's FEMA and the DNR that determine what the floodplain is, and it's reflected on the maps that are then adopted by the city according to FEMA.
In terms of adaptation of those maps, they're updated.
Periodically, FEMA updates
They
the
are
maps.
final when they're issued.
Right.
So what is the context of preliminary when we're talking about preliminary?
We have current maps right now, and now we got a new set of maps that came in here recently that FEMA did the study, and we're in they're not official yet. but we're reviewing those maps so they become official next year.
So they're final from FEMA, they're preliminary for the city.
They're still in preliminary draft mode right now until the city reviews it and it goes through that process. And there may be some changes to that map, to those panels, because we will review those maps and see if there's any changes, if there's any additional studies that need to be done. Projects that were taking place in the last few years that weren't accounted for in the maps. We want to make sure that that data is in the maps to reflect the current and accurate floodplain boundaries.
And that would all be extensively considered later on when we're in plating and reviewing proposed engineering and land improvements and all of that.
That's part of that process.
Whatever the map is that's on the books at the time a development comes in, whatever FEMA map is on the books, which is in this case is the 2014 map, is that correct, David?
Yep.
That's the current map. So what we're talking about in the future is not relevant to this particular case. The current map that's on the books is the 2014 map.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who would like to comment on the land use map amendment before I close it to the public? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment, public hearing, and ask if the applicant has any kind of follow-up they would like to address on any of this before we move on to the commission. Anything from the applicant? No. Seeing none, we'll bring it to the commission for.
I have a question again on the FEMA map. It's the flood lane has been reduced in the current, and that is, I know you're not FEMA and can't necessarily answer for them, but that is because developments north of there have slowed down the amount of water that they project will go into there, or why has the flood zone or flood area reduced?
Yeah, you can answer that, John.
John Biederman, civil engineer with Fairgram. Couple things. David did a good job of explaining kind of the time frame of the various maps. This is a copy of the study that was done in 2014 by FEMA, so this does exist. I pulled this off the internet, it's there. So that does exist, and that represents the blue shaded area that David had on the map. So that's all the way it currently is today, as Karen and David had mentioned. Researched this a fair amount back in the day when the 85 and the 2011, which was just a copy of the 85 mapping, was done. There was not detailed topographic or elevation data that was available or used for that study. So they had a very rough elevation map, if you want to think of it. Obviously was not overly accurate. So that 70% coverage, kind of that southwesterly part that was shown in a floodplain, that's actually on a ridge. There's a ridge that runs through there. So when you look at it, there's no way that could be possible. But based on the data they had back in the day, that's the level of accuracy. From what I'm able to gather from the 2014 study, they had some better data. It wasn't perfect, but as we go on year after year, there's better elevation data available. So they took what appears to be the same profile and applied that to this better elevation data and came up with what that blue shaded area is. So that's kind of my interpretation from what I've found. So that's why it's, to answer your question, that's why it's gotten smaller over time, is there's better elevation data to apply it to. So I don't know that we have the draft version that has been talked to about here to show, but it's actually smaller yet. It's different shaped. In areas it's a little bigger, in areas it's a little smaller. It is applied to another level of accuracy of mapping. So that's kind of where that's coming from. And that's not just Cedar Falls, that's across the entire state. And these counties are being brought in kind of annually. Some have happened already, some like Cedar Falls happening in 2021, others will be a little later. So it's kind of a staged process. But as more accurate data becomes available, the maps supposedly become more accurate. So that's kind of the process as I'm aware of it.
Okay?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, John. Dave, I don't know if you can confirm this or not, but it seems like, I mean, when we do these land use maps, especially when we get out into areas that are undeveloped, it seems like we're a little bit broader brush across there when we do the land use. Wasn't that parcel just kind of because of that vagaries before, some years ago, when we updated the land use map, just took that whole thing and changed it to the floodway or green space designation, just kind of to make sure we had it covered properly, you know, because now we're talking about kind of a refinement to the land use map to more tailor it to the actual information we have today. Is that accurate?
Well, before the land use map was changed in 2012, this was identified as single-family or low-density residential.
That's what, okay.
Which was kind of that area around the site. But really, land use, they don't really follow property lines.
Right.
So it's just,
Right.
from my recollection, they just kind of, since they looked at the 2011 maps that was approved, you know, before the comprehensive plan was changed in 2012, they just.
And that was single-family residential at that time, yeah.
The land use map is based upon the flood maps at that time.
That's what it was.
Yeah. Which would account for it as being as wide as it was. But yeah, now we're actually looking at an RP versus a single family. Okay. Commissioners?
Close the public hearing?
I think I already did that.
Okay.
If I didn't, it's closed.
Well, obviously, there's some water issues. Those aren't necessarily a part of our discussion tonight. I guess it's a consideration. But land use map, if what I'm hearing is correct, is a response and a reaction to a floodplain map that is outdated.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, I mean, from a land use perspective, I think it makes sense. Now, there's going to be issues with water potentially, but that gets dealt with at another level.
Right.
I mean, we know there's floodplain through there and that type of thing. That's got to be designed properly and meet all the criteria with all the best information we have, that type of thing. But as far as, you know, use of the land, it seems like an appropriate use. I know there was mention of, you know, things that get into site planning, which is also not directly related to the land use. Land use is the first step, and, you know, whether there's a 3-story building here or there, that's a site plan issue which gets addressed at that point. But I don't think that the land use itself is inappropriate. It seems appropriate. That's my take.
I agree. I think the land use makes sense. And I think that there are a lot of valid concerns brought up. But my thinking in that the land use makes sense is under the assumption that those concerns would be addressed at the appropriate time.
Do we have a motion?
I move that we approve the land use change.
Is there a motion? Is there a second?
A second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote.
I'm getting an error message.
Uh-oh.
It didn't go.
I think we're going to have to do a voice vote.
Since we are, our electronics are not cooperating, we'll go by voice. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, same sign.
Aye.
And, okay, so we have all ayes and one, except for one opposed. So that motion carries. So that brings us to our next item of business, which is the rezoning from A1 to RP for this same southeast corner of Union Road and West 12th Street. And I assume, David, you're continuing on?
Yes, thank you. So as part of the rezoning from A1 to RP on this 42-acre site, we take a look at some criteria to make that zoning change work. And again, we just covered the land use amendment that would fit this development. Other factors we look at is utilities, sanitary sewer service in the area, and does this property have adequate roadway access? So moving along, we did change that land use amendment, or the commission is recommending approval to City Council, so we'll move that along. So that was a change from the greenways and floodplain to the planned development and maintaining that floodplain through the middle there. The sanitary sewer service runs through the center of the site. We have tapping fee as that development continues and opens up for final platting. That tapping fee will be basically calculated on a per acre rate for that. So the sewer is there. Water mains extend along 12th Street and Union Road. As that water main was placed in Union Road, there's connection fees for that, and that goes to CFU. So the utilities are there, sanitary sewer, water. Other utilities will be extended to the site as this development continues. Roadway access, we have 12th and Union as your collectors and arterials through that area. Those roadways support the existing and this development and future development. So as this area in western Cedar Falls continues to develop, we will make sure that those existing roadways serve the traffic, provides good circulation within and around the surrounding area. So we want to make sure that we have those neighborhood connections. So there are multiple outlets and ways to get through the neighborhood. So this does show future roads running to the east and then running to the south, while maintaining those connections onto, again, those surrounding areas of 12th and Union Road. Moving along, we take a look at other factors when we look at an RP district. And again, the concept plan is for this low-density development with single family and 2-unit patio homes. When the developer and applicant or the property owner gets ready to do those larger units, that will come back for the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider and review those site plans. And again, we look at building design, landscaping, building height issues and how they fit with this within the neighborhood. There's setbacks along 12th and Union that create that buffering and areas. So this is the development of that. The next steps after this process, we do want to run into the platting phase, and that's a preliminary plat of this 42 acres. So again, we look at the floodplain modeling and the stormwater review and how that impacts surrounding properties and downstream properties. So with this, we're just focusing on the RP zoning at this time, and the next steps are those platting issues. Basically, the concept development plan is a 55-plus residential community with 1- and 2-unit dwellings. Again, I mentioned before, there's 1- and 2-story dwellings near the south side of the site, and a 3-story dwelling near the northwest corner of the site. We have some identified right-of-way that will have to be dedicated as part of the platting process, and that's along the south side of 12th Street. So that will accommodate any future traffic needs in that area. And we do have a planned recreational trail from 12th to 27th Street, and that's in the CIP budget here in the next couple of years. But as part of this, the developer will take part of that or cost share in that section, and that's the trail construction. The length of their site there is identified. So with that in mind, we want to recommend approval of the rezoning change to RP planned residence, subject to the city staff recommendations, any comments from the Planning and Zoning Commission, and along with that is a developmental agreement that really outlines the concept plan and other factors associated with this site.
Thanks, David. This is again a public hearing, and so I'll ask if the applicant would like to add anything regarding this rezoning request before we open it to the public. No? Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing open and ask for anyone in the audience who would like to comment on this rezoning request. Seeing none, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Ask if, again, the applicant has any comment. There's none. So I will bring that back to the commission for a motion or discussion. Questions?
So just to bring up water runoff again, there's nothing this development can do to improve any water issues north of it, but any water running into this property will have to be maintained and released, so it should improve the situation in that development and south of that development.
Yeah, this site is downstream from the areas to the north and south, so it's part of the plat, preliminary plat. They have to accept that water from those surrounding sites, collect it with their water, detain it, and then release it, and so on. So then the property to the south, downstream to the southeast, will have to do the same thing before it enters into the Lexington subdivision. So there's kind of two parcels before we reach that Lexington Heights subdivision and everything beyond that.
And so, and how are we going to guarantee that there won't be additional runoff farther south, such as into Lexington? I know that was one of the statements, but how can we confirm and verify and make sure that, and what are the actions if it does happen, if there is a water runoff that increases to, for example, Lexington Heights southeast?
Well, right now it's not studied. It's all farmland. It's uncontrolled. So as part of the subdivision platting and development, we take a look at that runoff and make sure it's contained and released accordingly.
So we would measure it and then after the fact go back and verify that it isn't worse?
Well, as part of the ordinance, we set up these stormwater detention basins. They're annually checked. They're maintained. That's based on staff inspection and responsibility of the private property owner.
They're going to be required to do an engineering study to determine what those levels are.
Yes, it's all part of the platting process.
It's all engineered and measured and designed and.
So I'm raising the question of after the fact, all the work has been done, the engineering has been done, and it's not supposed to create additional water issues, but it does. Then what's the fix? How does it fixed? Or is it the homeowners farther southeast that they have to deal with it, even though they've been promised that it won't be a problem?
Well, again, as part of that Lexington Heights subdivision, that wasn't part of the, when they platted that, we didn't have stormwater control features.
Because that's single-family residential,
Yes,
right?
for that entire subdivision, we did not have that ordinance in effect. Any new ordinances, we have to make sure that's addressed. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Well, I think what I'm hearing is that if it happens, because Lexington was developed before that ordinance, the homeowners in Lexington will just have to deal with it if there's additional water runoff. So it's not expected to have additional water runoff. So it's planned not to. If it turns out that the plan is not what actually happens, there is no fix. There's no.
Yeah, and I guess you can take a look at that reach. It's unlike riverine flooding. That's more of a flash flood event, and we might have had, we had large rain events last fall that does create that flash flood, come up and come down very quickly. So that could have been outside of the original parameters of the 100-year, 500-year flood. So it's.
So just to be clear, the city has an ordinance for stormwater management, and it's required, every development is required to meet those standards, and they have to prepare calculations. The applicant's engineer has to prepare calculations, and then the city engineer's office reviews those calculations to make sure that the stormwater facilities are adequate to handle a 100-year storm. Now, if there's a storm that exceeds that, of course, that system is not, the ordinance is not set up to address those kind of extreme events. And as we all know, there has been more extreme events now that come and go, and this is a flash flood situation. So it could be that the Lexington development was built under different stormwater management rules at that time, and things have changed over time, and we've gotten more strict about our stormwater management over time. So it could be that development is the stormwater basins maybe not handling what it should, and causing some issues. The development upstream has to show that it meets the current standards in the code, and those are reviewed at the time of the plat. And so what we can say is that it would go from an uncontrolled farm field to a more controlled situation with actual stormwater management plan and stormwater basins that would hold that water and release that into that drainage way at a more controlled rate. So that's what we can say would happen after development occurs. There's no guarantee that everything will be able to handle any flood that comes along and that no one will ever get flooded, because we just won't be able to do that.
But I'm trying to understand unintended consequences and whether or not the stormwater that the ordinance in place that is verifying the water in that new development isn't going to make it worse for an existing development.
Right, so they have to do calculations that are based on and maybe the applicant's engineer could speak to that particular point, but they have to do, because we're not engineers, we're planners sitting here, but they have to do calculations that would show the land area and what runoff would occur in that development and what water they're taking in from upstream, and show how they're going to control that.
And how the water going downstream isn't going to be worse than what it was beforehand.
Right, because they're are putting in stormwater basins that weren't there before. Right now it's a farm field, so they'd be putting in stormwater basins to handle and hold that water and release it at a slower rate.
You're kind of asking what's the probability that they're going to be right?
Well, I know that it's, as much as we like to believe that we can predict exactly what's going to happen, there's unintended consequences, and the actual results are not always as planned. And I'm for development, and I want to see development, but I don't want to see existing developments be worse because of
There's really not a mechanism that addresses that, though, is there? I mean,
We have to use the best available science at the time and the ordinances that are on the books at the time, and everybody has to meet those standards.
But it will be controlled, and currently it's not being controlled.
So is it safe to say that it would be a betterment downstream?
In theory, you would think so.
I think we could say that it's more controlled. The situation would be controlled.
All right.
Like I said, you can't control and predict what the weather would be in every flooding event.
Okay, so if it's controlled and all the calculations and everything under the stormwater ordinance and so forth, if that's all done, is it safe to say that it wouldn't worsen the conditions that are present currently downstream?
If it's done by ordinance to create these detention basins, no.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And that's part of, that detailed review would be part of the platting and site plan and reviewing the engineering and all that sort of thing?
Yes.
Okay.
I know everyone wants to talk about the water issues because they're real. I mean, I'm hearing everyone raise some real concerns, but what we're really talking about right now is zoning.
Zoning, yeah.
And I look at the arterials of Union and 12th as certainly are major arterials now, and certainly in the next decade are going to be much bigger than they are if we look forward to the planning. And it seems to me that it's appropriate from a zoning change, and I say that not to mean that we're going to ignore the water issue, because it's real, and I guess I would send a message to the developer that we have had a history of hearing these kinds of concerns with developments, and I would strongly encourage the developers, and we have on past projects, to work with the community to make some betterments as part of being a good neighbor. if you're going to move into the neighborhood here. So with that, that's an issue in the future. We're hearing your concerns. What we're doing tonight is a little bit different than that, and not that we're pushing it down the road, but it's a different step that we're going to take. So with that, I think the A1 to RP is appropriate, and I would move to approve that we make that change.
I have a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Moved and seconded. Any other discussion or questions? Seeing none, should we try the machine again? No? No go? Okay. We're going voice vote all the way tonight. So all those in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed, same sign.
Aye.
And one opposed. So that motion also carries. So that concludes our public hearings for tonight. On the old business calendar, Karen, do we have to take action on the College Hill Neighborhood Overlay District, or is that just automatically deferred, or do we have to take the 2119 College Street?
So the commission deferred this at the time in order to wait for the city council to take action on the zoning code amendments that are running through council. Council has held a public hearing and taken the first vote on those code amendments, and a majority voted to approve them. There's 2 additional votes that have to occur before that new ordinance is adopted.
Okay.
So
we're in between the first and second readings on that. So
I'll motion to defer.
do we need a motion?
sure.
Yeah, okay. There's a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
And a second. All in favor signify with aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, so that is deferred again. Thank you. Our next item is Green Hill Village Townhomes 2, the preliminary plat. And Karen, are you introducing that?
Iris is going to actually introduce the item, but I did want to go through,
Okay.
There's a slide here that kind of runs through some
Yes,
of that
please.
process issues that people had concerns about. And I know there's a lot of concern about the process, but I did want to lay out sort of a little bit about the state code and the legal process for approval of these kinds of developments. So in chapter 354 of the Iowa State Code, it has the legal requirements and minimum review standards for subdividing land in the state of Iowa. In that code, it allows cities some latitude to review those according to our own ordinances and our comprehensive plan. But it does state that the city council needs to act either to approve or deny within 60 days of a submittal of an application. So they must either approve the plat, or if the plat is disapproved by the city council, the council must state the reasons for the disapproval. In other words, you need to state your findings of fact. What it is about a preliminary plat that doesn't meet those platting standards in the city code and the state code. So that same standard would then apply to the Planning and Zoning Commission when you're reviewing the plats that are before you. You would also be reviewing the plats according to the platting requirements of the city code. And so you would be making your recommendations based on that. So any of your findings of fact, if you're voting to approve, if you're voting to deny, you need to state your reasons why it doesn't meet the subdivision standards in the code. So just to reiterate, and I think Mr. Holtz went through this at the beginning of the meeting, but the Planning and Zoning Commission is an advisory body. It's not a decision-making body, but it has its recommendations are taken seriously by the City Council. In this case, the role of the commission is to review the proposed subdivision and make a recommendation to the City Council for approval or disapproval based on whether it is consistent with the adopted master plan for the mixed-use district, which is the current zoning of the property, and the city's comprehensive plan and the standards of the city's subdivision ordinance. The commission does not have the authority. They're here to hear the public's concerns, but the commission does not have the authority to amend the master plan for Green Hill Village that was adopted by resolution of the City Council in April of 2018. Only the owner of the property in question or the City Council have the authority to petition for a change to that master plan. If such a petition is made, only then can it be placed on the Commission's agenda for consideration. So that is the legal process that has to occur for any change to that master plan that is part of, that was adopted by resolution at the time this area was zoned mixed use and has been amended a number of times since then. And Ms. Lehman is going to go back through that history again, because it is complex and something that most people are not familiar with. So she'll run back through that history. So just a reminder that the commission really can only take action on items that are on the agenda, and a change to the master plan is not on the agenda tonight. So you're being asked to consider a petition that's on your agenda for a subdivision plat, and after that for a site plan review for this development.
Thanks, Karen.
Thought I'd hand it over to Ms. Lehman to go through the history a little bit.
All right, sure.
Thank you. So before I start going through my slides, just wanted to bring to the Commission's attention that we did receive a number of correspondence between when the packet was sent out today. So I did print out.
Iris, can you a little closer? I think
Sorry.
we're having a hard time hearing you in the back.
Okay. So we did receive a number of correspondence between when the packet was sent out and the meeting today. So I did print those out and have those to you on your desk, and they will be made part of the public record as well moving forward to City Council, along with the ones that are already in the packet from previous correspondence. So Panther Farms LLC is proposing to subdivide 5.3 acres of land near the southeast corner of the Green Hill and Hudson Road intersection, the area here outlined in red. This land is part of about 130-acre Green Hill Village development. This item was introduced to the Planning and Zoning Commission on January 23rd and discussed on the February 13th regular meeting. Due to continued confusion and questions about the site, as with my presentation on the 13th, I would like to go through additional details about this project's background, and I've included more information about the MU district itself, as well as the master plan's progression. So the history of the site starts in 1994, when the city of Cedar Falls completed a land use study to identify future commercial development areas along the Green Hill Road corridor. As a result of this study, the city recommended rezoning the now Green Hill Village property to PC2, Planned Commercial Development. However, due to neighborhood comments and concerns, a second land use study was completed and resulted in the property being rezoned to MU, Mixed Use Residential, in 1998. With this rezoning, the first master plan for Green Hill Village was adopted and approved. I will go through details of the master plan in the next few slides. This rezoning in 1998 included the entire area of the subdivision now being considered. It has been brought to city staff's attention that a sliver of this property in question is shown as R1 residential on the assessor's website. This is incorrect. The assessor generally does a great job representing details of the city's documents within their mapping tools. The maps on their websites are visual representations of legal documents. Unfortunately, errors do occur. On the website, you will find a disclaimer. Zoning is city-based. The ordinance's legal description of the rezoning includes the area in question, and city zoning maps have correctly documented this area throughout their master plans, as well as their land use maps. There's an excerpt on the slide of one that I found just going through older documents from 2014 showing the area as MU. And also just to note, the city has no control over when or how the assessor updates their website. City staff does regularly send the assessor updates of our mapping, and we have communicated this error with them. In summary, the property under consideration to be subdivided today has been zoned MU mixed-use residential since the original rezoning in 1998. And then just in general, please don't hesitate to contact us to confirm property zoning. And then we have recently released our own website for interactive mapping, so you can look for your zoning there as well. It's on our city website under maps, and it's listed as the general viewer link. So, as noted with the rezoning in 1998, a master plan was approved that laid out the development pattern for the site. This was used as a guide for development in Green Hill Village. The intent of the MU district is to encourage a variety of home types, neighborhood commercial uses for the property, with the intent of creating a viable, self-supporting neighborhood. Permitted uses within the MU district range from neighborhood commercial office to single-family homes to multi-unit condominium buildings. With the intent of the district being to develop a mixture of uses, the code states that within an approved master plan, the majority of development and developable land within the master plan area must be dedicated to uses other than detached single-family residential development. This means that less than 50% of the Green Hill Village plan should be used for single-family homes. The original plan shown on the slide depicts this use. I have labeled the color-coded areas. In the original 1998 plan, only 9% of the total site was dedicated for single-family use, low density. This is the area shown in orange. On this slide, I also include the definitions from the 1998 rezoning and the master plan update for the different density types and what they mean. I'd like to note that what is being proposed is a density of 6.4, and that's a total build-out, so 34 units on 5.3 acres. That is on the low side of the medium-density residential definition defined here between 6 and 10 units an acre, so it is not a high-density development. In 2002, Walmart proposed to establish a 200,000 square foot supercenter at the northeast corner of the Green Hill Village site. This proposal was eventually denied by City Council. After the Walmart discussion, the master plan was revisited, an amended master plan was submitted and approved in 2003. The 2003 amended master plan kept elements of the original plan but greatly changed the residential density proportions. The master plan showed 25% multifamily and medium-density residential as opposed to the original 45%. The plan showed 43% single-family development as opposed to the original 9%. Based on the descriptions of that master plan, I have color-coded the areas based on the designated uses. Orange shows areas for multifamily medium-density development, yellow for low-density single-family, and red for commercial, and I just noted the park in green. I'd like to bring to your attention that the site does include an area, I don't think you can see my note, but this section here, that is marked for, or set for 12-unit luxury condominium buildings at 144 units total at a density of 11.3 units, so multifamily. So it does, again, the purpose of the MU district is to promote a mixture of uses. Since 2003, a number of areas in Green Hill Village were developed at lower densities than shown on the plan. I noted them on this slide. Areas shown in green were designated for either medium density or multifamily residential, but were built and developed as low to single-family development. The orange areas note areas that were intended for either multifamily or commercial development that were developed at lower densities than the plan noted. With this development that has occurred and the Green Hill Village mixed-use district master plan, as is designated, in total, you would have 36% multifamily medium density and 53% low density residential. The MU zoning district code, as I noted before, states that the majority, 50% and less, of the development and developable area of land within said district would be dedicated or should be dedicated for uses other than single-family residential. In March of 2018, a request was submitted to the Planning and Zoning Commission to allow for townhome development in the red outlined area on this map. This site was designated for single-family development and included a corner for commercial. The proposal showed medium-density development for this area. This proposed amendment to the master plan would bring the development percentages for single-family below the 50% mark, which is consistent with the intent of the MU district. A standard practice is to have single-family homes buffered from commercial areas by medium to high-density residential uses. The city's future land use map, the image to the right, closely follows the Green Hill Village 2003 master plan amendment, and it does show this general transition. Orange is indicating medium-density residential. The proposed master plan amendment of 2018 was consistent with the city's adopted future land use map from 2012, which showed medium-density residential in this area. Again, the site in question is outlined in red. It is for these reasons that staff supported the master plan amendment in 2018, and the amendment was unanimously approved by both Planning and Zoning Commission and City Council in April of 2018. The amendment was approved with the concept plan for townhomes. Townhomes are similar to duplexes and are essentially single-family homes attached to one another to create a multiple-unit building, in this case of 4 to 6 attached homes. The concept plan at full build-out, 40 homes or 40 units, falls in the medium-density definition. These types of units are similar in scale to and would coincide well with single-family homes and are an attractive household type for those who don't want to maintain a large yard but still like to enjoy a similar residential character as can be found in single-family neighborhoods. The proposed layout shows tuck-under garages located to the rear of the building to create a more pedestrian-style oriented residential character along the streets. The design leaves more green space between the buildings and the streets, which helps provide for a more friendly entrance and, again, neighborhood feel to these proposed buildings. The proposed scale of these buildings are similar to 2-story homes with a walkout basement. The proposed preliminary plat and site plan under consideration tonight is the first phase of implementing this plan. And I'll go into specifics on this in the next couple slides. The question about notification has come up multiple times since this project's introduction in January 23rd. Staff fully agrees that notifying neighbors of ongoing projects in their vicinity is a best practice and a good policy. It is for this reason, even if not required, that staff sends out courtesy mailings. Our records indicate that courtesy mailings were sent to neighboring property owners for the master plan update, as well as the subdivision and site plan proposal. The general mailings radius that's required for rezoning is 300 feet from the property site. We generally like to expand those boundaries to ensure that more people are notified. So for both the master plan update and the second notice for February 13th meeting, the mailing list was expanded well beyond that. On this slide, you will see a letter that was sent for the master plan update, as well as an image showing which addresses were on that mailing list. The proposed subdivision plat follows the layout of the approved master plan and concept plan. The preliminary plat proposes to create one buildable lot, outlined in red on this slide. The remainder of the site will be platted as a tract for future streets, outlots for future development, and 2 tracts for detention basins. The detention basin, outlined in blue, will be installed with the creation of Lot 1. It will collect the water runoff from that lot and will be oversized so that can serve the future development as well. A private alley will serve Lot 1, and sidewalks will be installed on the west and north sides of Lot 1, as well as along the east side of Tract B. I put together this image to illustrate what the site will look like at full build-out, based on the plat. Note that the proposal shows a detention basin in place of one of the 6-unit townhome buildings that was shown on the concept plan, the one on the far right. At full build-out, this site would have 34 units with a density of 6.4, again, the low end of the medium-density residential definition. I'd like to note at this time that the developer is just proposing to create Lot 1 and build 2 buildings on the northwest corner of the site, one being a 4-unit townhome building and one being a 5. So for those watching, it's these 2 right here. At the last two commission meetings, concerns were expressed about the amount of traffic that might be generated by this development. The city's engineer's office notes that depending on the circumstances, corridor constraints, an urban two-lane roadway can handle capacities up to 1,000 vehicles per hour during peak times. As previously noted, the proposed development at full build-out would have 34 townhome units. A townhome generates traffic similar to that of a single-family home. So it's about 7 trips per day per unit for a total of 238 trips per day. With the new street connections proposed with the subdivision, multiple travel routes along Norse Drive, Lloyd Lane, Addison Drive, and the proposed Lauren Drive connection, they will provide connections to arterial and collector streets. Therefore, traffic generated by this development will not exceed the capacity of the existing streets. Skipped ahead. Parking was also a noted concern for this development. The proposed plan, which we'll go into a little bit more detail on with the site plan discussion, does provide 4 parking spaces per unit, which does meet and actually exceed the parking requirement of 1 spot per bedroom, currently for 3. That's what they're looking to do. In addition, an advantage of placing all the required parking to the rear of the townhomes along the private alley is that it reserves the entire street frontage for parking without the interruption of multiple driveways onto the street. The layout also helps to reduce traffic congestion as there are fewer conflict points since drivers do not have to back out directly into the street. The streets are designed to accommodate parking on both sides. I'd like to note that another preliminary plat and final plat will be required once the developer is ready to move forward with development of the 2 outlots. At this time, the remaining sidewalk connections will be put in along with the streets with those improvements. The proposed preliminary plat is consistent with the approved master plan for this area and does meet all city subdivision codes. Staff recommends approval of the proposed preliminary plat. And then the applicant's here as well, if you have any questions.
Thank you, Iris. Would the applicant like to address the commission?
Hi there, good evening. Steve Trosky with CGA Engineers. Iris covered that very thoroughly, so we're just happy to answer any additional questions the commission or public may have.
Thank you. And we should note, I mean, so there's the plat, and then our next item of business is the actual site plan for this property, which is a separate matter, just to keep everybody straight on what goes on. So the plat is basically addressing the development of the lots, right? I mean, that's not much more than that. And then the site plan, we will actually look at the proposed layout. So just so people are aware of that as we address this. So at this point, I'll open it up for public comment on this item. If you'd like to speak to the platting of this, name and address. And
Ishan Vajpayee, 3831 Conver Lane. Just here as a citizen today that kind of keeps track of some of this stuff and want to add my perspective on the matter. It's interesting to hear that the records indicate the mailings went out, but there's no presented record to show that. When I make a letter, when I write a letter in my office and I need to know who got it and when it was sent out, it has a date on it and it has the address of the person to whom it was addressed. I make a photocopy of it and it goes in my file. So if someone says, you didn't send me that letter, I say, yeah, I did, and here I do. Have the copy, and here's the address. We don't have that here today, and maybe it's because it doesn't exist, and maybe it's because they thought we don't need to see it as citizens. But I presume that if it existed, we'd be seeing it, so I have to assume it doesn't exist. And so something to think about is who should bear the brunt of this problem? I think it's an admitted problem in this communication process. Why are the citizens told that maybe the mailing didn't go out and it's best practice and maybe it didn't happen and we can't really prove that it did even though we say it did and you say you didn't. So why are they being told that there's nothing we can do about it now your concerns can't back any of this up. Why can't the staff go to the developer and say, we screwed up, and unfortunately it's going to land on you, and we apologize, and we're going to have to back this up a little bit? Why is it that the citizens are being told that they have to bear the burden of this mistake? I think that these notices, while not legally required, as admitted, are the best practice. And like one of the prior speakers stated, people have come to rely on these notices. I mean, if you follow these meetings, you know that these notices are sent out. You start relying on them. So even if it's not required, you're relying on it. And if this happened in my backyard, and I never got a notice from the city, and somehow it showed up 3 months later on a meeting agenda as having passed, you go, what the heck? You know? I've been keeping my eye out for these notices. And I assumed I was going to get one, and it creates it's inappropriate. If you're not going to do it because you're not legally required to do it, then don't do it. But don't make people have that false sense of security that they're going to get notified when something huge is happening behind their house, and then they're not. And the proof is in several other projects that these notices are very constructive for developments. They help the developer, they help the citizens, and they help the city make sure that the developments are appropriate for the neighborhood. When it's been cited that Walmart wanted to build their super center out there, the community came together and dialogued, and it didn't work out, so something else was proposed. I followed the issue with Quickstar going in, and there's a lot of problems with that from citizens and complaints about that. But after a really long dialoguing series, Quickstar worked with the citizens to make concessions, and it was more acceptable to other people than its previous proposal. That didn't get to happen here because the notices weren't sent. And I guess these people behind me who actually live in the neighborhood can say their piece on whether they got their notices or not, and the city can tell them that they're wrong, but the city can't prove they're wrong. And instead of just plowing ahead on this based on their mistake, the developer and the city should take the hit. Citizens shouldn't be deprived of their right to have commented. That's my observation on the matter. And I think, frankly, that problem in giving the due process to the citizens is enough for you to vote no on the preliminary plat. And don't think that it's going to be too difficult. It's kind of been posed as, well, then you're going to have to state a reason. That's the reason. It doesn't have to be some long position paper as to why you voted no. There's your reason. Substantive due process rights of these citizens were, they were deprived of those rights. Thank you.
So, just quickly before, Chris, before you jump in, just one of the things you brought up, Karen, in kind of your overview was that the process, because there's a lot of concern, we really don't have the process here, but it sounds like the city council, it can be petitioned to the city council. Was that what I heard in that, in your, to reopen up the zoning and address this whole other issue, which isn't on the agenda tonight?
So just to be clear, this is, the change to the master plan was not a rezoning. It was a change, it was
Right.
done by resolution, a change to the master plan. The zoning has been on the books mixed use since 1998.
Right.
The issue of the notification to the neighborhood, we do have records. We have, in fact, Iris had on the screen here a copy of the letter that was sent out. It's dated, it's got her initial on it, and we have the mailing list that was sent out and a map that was included that. Those are all in our files. We do have the records of that. It's not to say that everybody everybody has concerns that need to be expressed, but I just want to make clear that our records do indicate that a mailing was done back in 2018.
But my question was then further was that on the procedural things you were talking about, the place for this to be addressed is at the city council level, correct? Where a petition goes to the city council, they take action, and that's where the things that we can't address here in the planning and zoning can be potentially addressed at the city council levels. And
Yeah, the commission doesn't have the authority to amend the master plan. That's
Right.
not on the agenda, and that's why.
But that could be driven by action with the city council, which I think is important for the folks who are,
Right,
have these concerns, know that, and know what the potential remedy is that we're not able to provide. Is that?
The city council would have the authority to on a motion, to direct staff to bring back a change to the master plan. And
Just
it
wanna
would
make
come
sure-
back through this body as then a recommendation to be considered as part of, through all those same processes that were done before.
Yeah, so for all you out there who want, that's a methodology that we can offer up that exists for doing that. So go ahead, Chris.
Did you folks make a recommendation to the city council to change the master plan?
We did. So in February, March, whenever it was, and, you know, as I recall, there was nobody there, and it fit with the land use and all that good
Point
stuff.
being taken is, we don't show up for a reason or two. Nobody shows up to contest this. It gets put through.
Well, and we may or may not have put it through anyways. That's, you know, that's the whole
That's a
thing.
relevant statement, but then we show up, and now you can't help us. Now we got to go to the city council. It seems like, let me finish.
If it was up to me, we would probably do something, but it's not up to me.
But you guys caused the problem by recommending it to the city council. Now you can't undo it. You can't go to them and say, hey, time out, we might have had bad information. Let me finish. They can't amend the plan, but they can vote no tonight, and I think that's important. The traffic issue in that subdivision, when they put a traffic light at the corner of Eric and Hudson Road, all traffic from that subdivision that goes south to Walmart or any of the new development out there goes through that traffic light. I don't mean part of it, I mean all of it. And we're going to add 136. Now, Iris, on your math, I know we still call these 3-bedroom condos, but the developer is drawing in a 4th bedroom. He says, I don't know what we're going to do with it. Whatever they want to do with it, they can do with it. It's a 4-bedroom condo. All that traffic's going to go through our schools, our bus stops, everything. Okay. The water issues, and I'm just going to diverse for a second. We have 2 or 3 ponds in our subdivision. One of them has already overflowed twice in the 12-year period I've been there. The other one, which is a double pond, the dike is broken, and that's had to been repaired. And my intersection has flooded twice, over 18 inches, because of draining issues that have been designed by engineers. So if you guys are putting a lot of credibility into engineering, you might want to hire your own engineer, because what's happening and what's engineered are 2 different things, and that's and that's knowledge in our subdivision. So I'm sad. I encourage you to vote no. This committee got us to where we are now. You should help us get out of it. I have 45 notarized statements from 45 people that were on the mailing list stated, we didn't get the letter. I hope to gosh we can quit doing this dance, and you would believe us that we didn't get the letter. I couldn't get 45 people together to all tell the same lie. So if we can quit batting that ball back and forth, I'd be happy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Marianne Noland, and I live at 1510 Athens Court. I am a retired kindergarten teacher from the Waterloo schools, and I think we all know that everything you needed to know about life you learned in kindergarten. I'd like to go back to the city staff's member that had the bullets about what's going to be voted on today. There is a point there that is invalid. The point being that this was all okayed in 2018. We are a group of honest people. If we say we didn't get the letter, we didn't get the letter. What's happened is we're running a race, and you have cheated. I'm a kindergarten teacher. I line the children up, and I say, when you hear someone say 1, 2, 3, go, you go. I say 1, 2, two little characters over here start running. They've cheated. But I can't use the word cheated because I can only use the words, that's not fair. Let's rethink this. Is it fair that you started the race before I did? No, it's not. I'm a grown-up now, and I know all kinds of words that I've been holding inside here tonight. We have been cheated. You have cheated in this race. And if you want to continue to run this race and win the prize, I know Mr. Dahlstrom. I've known him since he was a little boy. He went to school with one of our children. He's a nice gentleman. Someone needs to look him in the eye. I've tried to talk to him and say, slow this down, but I'm not able to visit with him. I agree with everyone ahead of me. Stop cheating on this race. Back up to the start. Let someone say 1, 2, 3, go. Run the race fairly, and the person that wins deserves the prize, not the person that started early and cheated. Please think about that. Does your heart feel a little heavy? Remember when you were in kindergarten and maybe you didn't win something, or you didn't get something that someone else got? Think about that. That's what you're doing, is you're not playing fair. And I ask you to vote no tonight because we were not informed, and this is not a fair race. Thank you.
Good evening. Seth Vickers, 1531 Andover Court. It was stated earlier as part of this process, if you vote no on this, you have to give reasoning for it. And it has to be a good reason, I imagine. One of the things that Iris had brought up as far as part of her recommendation and her reasoning for the recommendation with the traffic concerns is that the townhomes can be expected to have 7 trips per unit per day. We know right now the townhomes that are in our area, 44% of them are rentals right now. The majority of those have college students in it. And the majority of those have 4 college students in it. That's 4 cars. 4 cars, 4 college students. How many trips do you think they're making a day? I'm guessing it's more than 7. I'm wondering if there's a way that we can do some research on this and see the actual townhomes that are in our area. I think there is a strong expectation that when these townhomes go up, 44% of them are going to be turning into rentals, and we're going to have big traffic concerns based off that. So if you need your reasoning, there it is right there. You can vote no on this just based off the traffic that what they're saying is flawed. 7 trips per unit per day. It's going to be more than that in that area, and we already have traffic concerns. Thank you.
Tim Jarks, 1521 Athens Court. Okay, I've been in the construction business most all of my life. I've seen calculations and tons of calculations. Now, there's analysis been done here and projections been made by staff per studies, engineers, whatever you want to call it. Comment was made, parking can be on both sides of the street, and it allows for 2-way traffic in between that. Okay, just to prove the point, I dare any one of you, okay, let's park a car on each side of the street. Let's zero it down to 15 miles an hour, and let's meet in between those 2 cars that are parked on each side of the street. One of us is either going to get killed, but at a minimum, we're going to lose mirrors. It don't work. Think about it. It don't work. It don't make sense. Go try it. Go find a place where there's 2 cars parked on each side and wait till there's a car coming, and you 2 go through there. Try it. I don't care if this was changed in 94, 98, 1912, it's all irrelevant. What's relevant is what took place in March of 2018 when it was changed. That's what counts, okay? The fact that part of this was designed to be high-density, multifamily homes, and they built single-family homes here, they built single-family homes here, instead of the multiplexes or whatever you want to call them, it's irrelevant. The developer at the time chose to put single-family homes there instead of condos or multi-story buildings. It's irrelevant. What's relevant is what's happening now. What's happening to our neighborhood. We're there now. It got changed in March of 2018. That's been stated. That's a fact. So, if it wasn't relevant for you guys to vote tonight, you wouldn't be here. This would just happen. So you have a choice. You can vote yes, or you can vote no, right? Thank you.
Any more comments on the plat before us? Seeing none, I'll bring it back to the commission.
I'm the one who asked it to be deferred till this meeting so that we could get legal counsel on what our options were. And our options are we cannot change the zoning. The city council or the developer could request that be changed. And what's at hand is the development already fit for this mixed use. So I appreciate everyone coming out tonight. It's nice to have an audience like this. Usually we don't have this big a crowd, but we can't really address the zoning issue here to change that back to residential. So that's something that needs to be taken up city council or with the developer. But otherwise, I think the proposal in front of us fits the mixed-use zoning. So I really struggle with this this proposal.
Because lots of attention has been on the 2018 letter and whether it did or didn't go out, and I don't think anyone's here calling anyone else a liar. I don't know. It's unfortunate, and we should do better. But if I'm hearing you, Iris, in your report correctly, this development is less dense than the 1998 and the 2003 master plan that were proposed. So let's take 2018 off the table, and we have to consider it, I know, but even going back to 1998 and 2003, it was a mixed-use development with densities that were higher than what are being proposed today. Is that correct?
Overall, yes, that is correct.
I wasn't here for the part where the master plan would have been updated last year and then subsequently approved by city council. Whether it's a popular idea or whether I would like it or not, when I look at it objectively, I think that the buffer, the transition makes sense. I would have supported the update to the map at that time. I think it's unfortunate. A couple of things that are coloring this whole matter is the error on the assessor site, which from what I've seen is only on part of this parcel. The majority of the outlined area is actually shown correctly. That's enough to get mad about, and if a notice wasn't received, that's enough to get mad about too. But what I see is that that we have, a matter in front of us to answer whether this site and subdivision makes sense with the plan, and I feel that it does. I have a couple of ideas or comments that would pertain to the actual site plan itself. But as far as the matter of the plat is concerned, I feel like it makes sense for the zoning and for the plan.
Motion?
I'll motion to approve the plat.
There's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Is there any further discussion?
Here now.
Okay. I just make one comment before we vote, because I voted for this amendment back in March. I'm not sure how I would have voted. I can't tell you if I would have voted for it or not with the additional information. I just feel a little boxed into a corner that we've got to make a decision that don't feel good about the whole process. I will say that, there are other avenues, and those who are interested, I hope will address that. But I feel like, because we do, within the parameters, we have to make a decision. I'm probably going to go ahead and vote for this, but it's got to be addressed at the council level anyway. So I just want to put that out there. Anybody else want to have a comment? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and vote. And this time we got the machine working.
Got it.
All right. We have 6. Somehow we're off here.
That's correct. There's
It's not showing me as voted.
Showing you
Hillary voted.
Oh, thank you. Okay, I'm Hillary tonight. So we do have six ayes, so that does pass. Our last item of regular business is the Green Hill Townhomes 2 site plan. So Iris, are you reviewing that also?
I am, thank you. So the site plan is for Lot 1 of the previously discussed preliminary plat. Approval of the site plan is contingent on the approval of the Green Hill Village 2 preliminary plat, as well as the subdivision, submission and approval of a final plat. Lot 1 is at the southeast corner of the Lloyd Lane and Norris Drive intersection, and it can be seen here kind of outlined in red. The image shows the concept plan that was approved for this area. The proposal for Lot 1 consists of the northwest section of the concept plan. It comprises of 1 4-unit and 1 5-unit townhome building. You can see that what is being proposed follows the concept plan fairly closely. The largest change being that the private alley connection is being proposed coming off of Lloyd Lane, so from the north instead of the south, and this is largely due to topography. A turnaround is also being proposed where a future private alley will continue to the east. In reviewing a site plan within the mixed-use development district, there are 2 areas that need to be reviewed, the site plan elements and then the facade elements. Review of both, so I'll go through both elements with you here today, and I'll really hit on the highlights for each point, and then more details can be found in the staff report. So within the site plan, there are the elements listed that we review. The first is the proposed use. As I mentioned before, they're proposing 9 units in total, 2 townhome buildings with 4 and 5 units. The proposed height of the development is at 34 feet 11 inches, with a maximum allowed for the area of 35 feet, so it does meet that as well. The setbacks proposed fall within the requirement of a 30-foot parameter around the site, and then 20-foot internal setbacks. They do meet those standards. Parking is also being met. It is required that there's 1 spot per bedroom. As noted previously, the plan currently shows 3 bedrooms with an optional bedroom added on the main floor by the garage, so 4 potential bedrooms. So with 4 spots being provided, that 1 spot per bedroom is met. Access, there will be access from as I mentioned, from a private alley off of Lloyd Lane. Sidewalks are being proposed both internally and externally on this site. Landscaping-wise, they're required to provide 854 landscaping points, and those are calculated by the types of shrubs, sizes of trees, those type of details. They are currently proposing a lot more than that, around 2,000 landscaping points. And as noted before, a nice element about having the garages off the back is that it leaves more space along the front, along the street, to have more of that landscaping and really emphasize more of a residential and welcoming character to those properties. Trash will be privately collected through a contractor. Stormwater management will be addressed via the detention basin that I described to the east with the subdivision discussion. And no signage is being proposed for this development. Here we'll see images of the building that is being proposed. On the far left is an image of the 5-unit building, both front and back. In the middle, you see the 4-unit front and back. And then on the far left there, or sorry, right, are the side elevations to the proposal. Again, noting that the tuck-under garages are along the back. So from the front, it'll be a 2-story building, from the back, a 3-story. So again, giving the sense of a 2-story home with a walkout basement. What I will do for the facade discussion is zoom in and focus really on the 5-unit townhomes for the facade, as the 4-unit building is really the same design. So there are 6 elements in the MU mixed-use district that we look at for facade review. Those are outlined here on the slide. Again, I'll walk through each of them here. So proportion. From the rear, as I noted before, the garage level is exposed along with 2 floors of living space. So from the street, it'll look like 2-story. From the back, it'll be closer to 3, again, with the feel of a walkout basement. The MU district encourages a variety of housing types, and the proposed design breaks up the multi-unit building, so each townhome is easily distinguishable and feels consistent and proportionate to that of the single-family home. In terms of the roof, the roof type they're proposing is consistent with the other pitched roofs within the development. Pattern, buildings have a distinct repeating pattern for each unit, both on the front and the back, along with overhangs and porches that also help create the depth and rhythm to those units, and then the windows as well help give it a residential feel. In terms of material and texture, to help distinguish between these units, vertical and horizontal cement siding will be alternated between the different units, and a brick liner will be used on areas where the foundation is visible. The applicant is proposing to use seam metal roofing. These materials are consistent with the district and what's there. Color, the applicant's proposing white siding, gray brick, which are fairly neutral colors, and each unit will have their own unique door color to help add visual interest and distinguish between the units. Architectural features, they're proposing porches, balconies, they're breaking up the roof line, which again help mimic the low-density residential feel that you see to the south. Overall, the site plan elements do meet the requirements. Again, I'd like to note that approval of the site plan will be contingent on the approval of the preliminary plat and submission and approval of the final plat. So we'll probably see this come forward to us again with the final plat.
Thank you, Iris. So would the applicant like to add anything to the report? No. Excuse me. I would open it at this time to any public comment on the site plan.
Tim Hansen, I'm at 1517 Athens Court. one question, I'm not sure how tall these buildings can be, what the max height is, but on your drawing there, it shows it looks like it grades back towards the garages, like this is built on a hill or something. And this ground that I'm aware of, it's my backyard, is flat in that area. So are they going to grade that off or something?
So they're graded in a way so that the garages are mostly kind of underground. So, but from the total height from, and we measured it from the lowest point, so that the garage point to the top is at 34 feet. So it does fall within the requirements of the height limitations.
What is the height then, Iris, on the west side that faces the street where it's cut back in there? Do we have that? I think that's what you're interested in too, Tim, is how high that.
Yeah, I mean, these are going to be in our backyard, whether it's this plot or it's the ones right in my backyard is what I'm going to be concerned with as well, obviously. But the grade shows it's being down, so that's grading down towards the garages, which is towards the water tower.
Right.
So is the water tower ground going to be higher than what these garage levels are going to be for garage door, and it's going to egress down? I don't understand. The picture looks great, but in reality, it could be something totally different.
So the applicant maybe could address some of those questions when you finish with your comments.
Yeah, we'll ask them to do that. Because that's a good question, yeah, because the way I'm reading it too is it's 2.5 stories maybe on the front side and 3 stories on the back.
It's fine if it's on a hill, but if it's on flat ground, something's got to be dug out.
Right, what gives then, yep. Is that something you'd like, we could get? Yeah, yes, if you would, please. I think I'd.
Good evening, Adam Daters with CGA Engineers. I guess the answer to that is both scenarios are accurate. There are some cases where that lower level will be really at or near just below existing grade, and with the units in question, or the units with the site plan application here, yes, I do believe that the alley on the east side of those buildings will be below that existing water tower grade. So the grade will recess.
You're going to recess it down for that?
Little cutoff swale right there to drain the backs of this private alley, and then out and around to the east to the detention pond as shown previously.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Yes, please.
Thank you. I'm Robin Frost at 4718 Addison Drive. Sorry I jumped the gun earlier. I arrived a little late and wasn't clear on where we were in the agenda, so I apologize for that.
Appreciate your comments.
Thank you. Just a couple of observations as we've learned a little bit more. Just echoing the concerns about the 2-story, 3-story confusion there. I'm not clear on which direction we're talking. I think we're talking about the garage side being facing the water tower.
Yes.
And then just thinking about that a little bit, and we've been talking a lot about drainage issues and things, wouldn't digging out, to go underneath for the garage, wouldn't that cause draining issues for the future residents that are going to be living and having those garages? I'm not an engineer, so I don't know, but just a couple of observations there. And I would go back to my earlier concerns that I just don't feel like the design of these really fits into the neighborhood. We have a lot of townhomes in the neighborhood already. They're a completely different look than what's being proposed. And I haven't studied them to understand, exactly the differences. We have some twin homes in the area that are fine, that they look almost like a single-family home, just a little bit wider. So those definitely fit. We've got townhomes that, are maybe 2-story, but they're just smaller. They're not the row-style housing that's being proposed here. And I think that's really something to consider. It's a departure from the established look. I noted that I think it was the engineers or someone said that these would mimic the look or the feel of the nearby single-family housing. Why are we trying to mimic it? Why can't we just make it single-family housing? It just seemed really like an odd comment that they're trying to make it look like it, but it isn't going to be single-family. So why not make the design overall a little bit more similar to what's already in the neighborhood, rather than reinventing the wheel and coming up with something that really doesn't fit?
Thank you. Any other comments? we'll close the public portion and bring it back to the commission.
I like the look of the project. I think it makes sense to add a kind of a homey, kind of welcoming look to a slightly higher density area. I think that the landscaping, I would suggest maybe in an effort to be neighborly that maybe some enhanced trees, larger trees maybe be added to the plans abutting the older existing homes. If I lived there, that's something that I would want to see. Just a neighborly suggestion, I guess. But overall, I think the site plan makes sense with the zoning and the use.
Yeah, I mean, I think the site plan is consistent with what's being proposed and what's been approved heretofore. I think the exteriors are a little, I don't know what the word is. I wish they were a little nicer looking on the outside, you know. They're a little plain Jane or something a little awkward, you know, especially since they are going to be tall. I don't know if it's something I can deny the project based on that, but I would hope for a little bit better aesthetics.
I was kind of thinking that an enhancement could be increasing the pitch of the roof to, I guess, better represent the intended kind of architecture or homage. But I can see where that real-world height could be a concern. If there are any, minor enhancements as the construction details get reviewed and allusions with trims and perspectives and that sort of thing. There are all kinds of ways to reduce the visual height of something, and it's hard to tell that from a 2D flat elevation. But those are things that I think would be nice to see in the project, but I don't see that those enhancements really affect the site plan.
Is the buildings at the maximum height right now? Is that why we have such low pitch roofs on there? Does anybody tell me that?
The maximum height is 35 feet, and it's proposed at 34.11.
So yeah, so that's why
Yeah,
we're
they're pretty much.
But that's measured from the garage side.
Correct.
Okay. But from the
To the top of the roof.
to the top of the roof. From the road side, they won't look as tall, though.
Correct.
But the requirement is from that garage side, right? In order to meet
That
the
is
requirement.
Yep, lowest to highest point.
Can I ask a question about that fourth bedroom? I know some people have been concerned about that fourth bedroom being another person possibly moving in and it turning into a rental. Can we get an approximate size on that? I mean, I don't know why anybody would want to turn that into a bedroom, but just to kind of alleviate some of those concerns. If we can get a size on that, then we might have a better idea of what most people are going to consider using that room for.
Based on the submitted floor plans, I can give you an approximate. If the applicant has a closer, okay, maybe I'll wait. You don't? Okay. So looking at the floor plans and staff report, I'm liking it to the bedroom on the, I guess, the third floor at the top corner, and it looks like it's 10 by
10 by 9.
10 by 9. It looks like it's about that same size.
Okay.
That's 4 second-floor rooms.
Sorry?
The fourth potential bedroom is where in the floor plan?
The fourth potential bedroom, I don't have it on the slides, it's on the ground floor by the...
If the floor plan, Iris? No.
It's on the ground floor by the garages, so behind the garage door.
There's Steve Trosky, CGA Engineers. We are not an architectural firm, so we have the drawings that are in your packet, but with some quick math, we think it's about 11 by 9, give or take a few inches.
Okay.
So relatively small room. And then there's a very small
But it would be
closet that would
bedroom.
be included in that.
9 by 11 still could be a bedroom.
It's consistent with the other bedroom sizes.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
But even if they were all 4-bedroom units, that does not, that still wouldn't invalidate the compliance from a parking standpoint or traffic or otherwise. So it would give the owner the discretion to use their interior the way they see fit, which I don't see really even relevant to this matter at hand, as long as what's considered a bedroom doesn't take us outside of those parameters.
Correct. When we did the site plan for this project, the code states about 1 parking spot per bedroom. And so there's 3 really planned out. So we need 3. And then because the future purchaser of the home could decide what they'd like to do, we said it would probably be easiest if we just did 4. And that way there's plenty of space for everybody, depending on what the future owner would want.
Thank you.
And I appreciate that. I just wanted to kind of clarify that point because people are talking about, oh, well, this 4th bedroom, it means there's going to be a higher density. Well, when I look at it, I'm thinking there's no way somebody's going to want to make that a 4th bedroom because you'd have to go upstairs to go to the bathroom. I mean,
Yeah, location's not good.
yeah, the location, I mean, I don't know what kind of exhaust fumes might come in from the garage, but I definitely wouldn't want to deal with that. But, so I was just curious, just so that we can maybe get that kind of on the record and alleviate some of those concerns, so.
I would move that we approve to council.
There's a motion to approve. Is there a second?
A second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, we will go ahead and vote. Votes are in, and we have 6 ayes, so that motion carries. Nothing on the new business calendar that I can see. Any commission updates, Karen?
I did send out an email to all commissioners about the upcoming training session that I think every couple of years maybe the Iowa State Extension holds basic training for commissioners and Board of Adjustment members just to talk about due process and roles of the commission. And it's a pretty good training from what I understand. And this year it's happened to be offered in April and there'll be a session in Waterloo, so fairly close by. So, I included the brochure in the email. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to, kind of look those up. But the city would it's just a one-night, one-evening course, and so if anybody's interested, just let me know, and we'll sign you up for that and let you know the details of that.
I was going to say, I did that shortly after I got on the commission and went to one of those events, and it was there was some interesting content.
I would concur. I did the same. I went to one shortly after I joined the commission, and it was valuable.
So just, email me and let me know who wants, if you'd like to sign up, we can take care of that for you, and that's all.
That's great. Thank you, Karen. I think that concludes our business for tonight. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
So moved. Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor signify by aye.
Aye.
Aye. So we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.